Welcome to Jana Trips and Tours. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that you enjoy something out of it. A lot has happened since my last video where I was talking about whether I would get the passport or not. And I have to say that the government of Canada came through, and I did get my passports about 3 days before we were about to go. But today I'm going to talk about the first part of our trip, which was flying to the cruise. Now, of course, as I talked before, the cruise was coming out of Bayonne, New Jersey. That's the port. And at first I did consider driving to New York. But after my sister and I drove there, it turned out that it was 12 hours. I don't know why it was 12 hours. So the next part was to take an airplane. So I started looking for tickets right away. One of the sites that I went to was Flight Hub. And there were several options. There was Air Canada, which had fewer flights than, let's say, Porter Airlines. Porter Airlines was another option. Now, Porter doesn't come out of Pearson. It comes out of Billy Bishop Airport, which is right downtown, right on the lake, pretty much as far south as you can go in Toronto. The Billy Bishop Airport is right on one of the Toronto islands. You know, I started looking at the reviews. The thing is that for airline reviews, you will often get very mixed reviews, whether it's the worst airline or the best airline. People always find a lot to complain about, and a lot of times people actually review only when they feel something negative about it, not when they feel something positive about it. And it's very hard often for people to feel so overwhelmingly positive about a flight experience, especially when they have cut down on food items, the free items, the baggage. At first, when I started looking for the flight, it was about 2.5 months out, maybe 2 months. So, and at that time, I could still find flights for $250. The cheapest ones were with Flair and, like I said, with Porter Airlines. I decided that this is just a 1-hour flight. I don't need to be the most comfortable on it. I can bring whatever, like just a purse, check the rest in, whatever the requirements are. As long as it's cheaper, then I'll just do that. Now, and so the Flair Airlines, which also had a lot of different flight options, not as many as Porter though. Porter had the most flight options, most flight times on the schedule. They were pretty comparable in price. Maybe Flair was a little bit cheaper, but overall, and that would go through Pearson. So I really debated whether I should go with Porter or with Flair and Air Canada. Those were the cheapest flights. I finally called my friend and I asked her if she's ever flown with Porter. She didn't, but she called her friend, and she did have a friend that often did fly with Porter, and she said it was great. And the thing that she told me that really convinced me was that it's a really easy process. You just go right through. There's barely any waiting lines, a lot less hassle, and that sealed the deal. Now, I didn't even know that Pearson by that time would have such major problems. And this is all I heard before I was flying, how there were so many delays at Pearson. It was a mess. So long, you had to wait a long time, and then there were crowds. And of course, during the pandemic, the crowds increase your chances of catching it. And I really didn't want to catch anything before my cruise, or I would, chances are I'd have to be quarantined on the cruise, which would be my biggest fear. Now, 2 months out, I still wasn't sure if I was getting the best deal. And every day I would check. Unfortunately, it started with $250 per ticket, the base price, but every time that I would check, it would just be getting more and more and more expensive. Now, it would have been best to buy with Porter Airlines directly, but that wasn't the cheapest price. And, I thought I would try and wait. Maybe they would go down in a few days, but they did not. They just kept getting more and more and more expensive. And so from 250 it went all the way up to 312, and then I finally pulled the trigger and bought the tickets. So later I looked up to see when is the best time to buy airline tickets, and it seems that anything beyond 90 days is just going to get more expensive. So you may wait for a cheaper flight if it's a year out, if it's half a year out, and see whether you can get it. But once you get something really, really good, it's just better to buy it. And now my cat is scratching at the couch. So yes, I definitely overpaid. I paid more than I could have paid for the airline tickets because I waited so long. And if you remember when I was talking about buying my cruise, it pretty much happened the same thing. I was trying to see if there would be a better deal. I waited and waited. I ended up paying maybe $300 more than I could have paid had I just jumped on it earlier. Okay, so we bought the flights. The next thing that I needed to buy was I needed to buy luggage check-ins. So each item cost $44. I bought it while I was checking in. Now, I don't know, maybe it would have been cheaper if I'd bought it right as I was booking the tickets. I believe that it would have been, but I really couldn't decide at the time whether we would need check-in item for each person, or I was thinking of just going to the store and buying a much bigger suitcase that would fit me and my son. My daughter said, no way, she's not sharing. So she had her own suitcase, but then I thought it's going to be about the same. Whether I buy a large suitcase, or I just pay for an extra luggage. And I just decided to pay for an extra luggage because I thought I didn't want to deal with another large suitcase. My house is not very big, and so that's another thing to store somewhere. But in the end, I paid $44 American for each bag that we checked in for each trip. So it was very expensive. Yeah. Overall, on top of our flights, I paid another $300 just to check in luggage. So the airplane did cost me more than I would have liked, of course, but this is an 8-day trip, and sometimes that's what you have to spend. Another thing with flying is that you also have the added expenses of usually taking a taxi to the airport and from the airport. And this was something that also worried me. That would be another huge expense. Luckily, my sister did offer to give us a ride there and back, so that probably saved us at least $120. We arrived at Porter, my sister drove me, and going through the airport, it was just like a walk in the park. There were no crowds. There were no people. We had to walk under the lake to get to the island, and it was just basically, they had like these movators, and it was about like a 5-minute walk, I guess. It was a breeze. When we got there, the check-in was 0 people. There was probably 5 people ahead of us, nobody around us. The whole hallway was almost empty. And then right after the check-in, we went through security. Again, nobody around us. Again, nobody there. Once we got to the waiting room, the lounge, there were quite a few people there waiting for their flights. No problem. Still a lot of seating around. Now, of course, the only thing I don't like is that the snacks and food is always very expensive there. Of course, you can't bring anything in. So right away, my kids spent $35 on like water and, I don't know, a sandwich and some chips, which I thought was outrageous. That's what happens when I give them a credit card while I go to the washroom. But overall, the Porter check-in was way better than Pearson, or from what I heard, Pearson would be at this time. And just because it's smaller, there's just like less hassle. You know, you just go right through. There's no problem at all. The flight, once we got to the flight was fine. It was smooth. We got like a little snack and juice, and it took only about an hour. Now, I booked a hotel that was closer to the airport, and we would get an airport shuttle. The moment we got to the shuttle, or the place where we waited for shuttles, the shuttle was right there. They drove us to the hotel. We stayed at the Spring Hill Suites by Marriott, and extremely spacious room. But there was nothing around us. My kids were kind of hungry. I didn't want to order like a big meal. You could order into the hotel from different restaurants around. But everything was very, very expensive. So we just ordered pizza, which was actually delicious. And it was about $20, which I guess in Canadian would have been about $30 or $27, but that's fine. The pizza was delicious, and that was enough to hold my kids over. There was wonderful breakfast with lots of options: oatmeal, fruit, eggs, sausages. The cruise check-in was about 12:30, and that's pretty much when we arrived there. And as soon as we got there and we waited in line, waited, and realized there was nobody behind us. Had we arrived there 15 minutes later, we would not have had to even wait. We would have just gone right through. And I asked the lady that was checking us in, when is the best time to come? And she said, either now when there was nobody else behind us, like there was probably like 5 people behind us, and then the whole hall was empty. And we arrived there around 12:30, maybe 12:45, maybe closer to 1, but after that there was just nobody there, or arrive really early. And I think next time I would have liked to book the time to arrive earlier, because we're paying for the cruise, and that is supposed to be one of the days that we are on the cruise, and there was nothing to do at the hotel. At least on the cruise, I can go explore the ship, I can go have a coffee at one of the cafes. The kids and I can have some dinner at the buffet, but and sitting in a hotel was just like a total waste, I think, of time. Anyway, that was the flight experience that I had now. And I do recommend going with Porter, especially at this time when everything is so busy. You can get to Porter if you don't want to spend money on taxi. You can just take Union. You can just take the TTC to Union Station. You know, depending on where you live, you just take the bus and the subway to Union Station. And from Union Station, there's complimentary shuttles. Anyway, thank you so much for watching if you watched this video, and have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.